Hello, with this video I'm starting a short series of videos about recent games of participants of the World Championship match, Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. First I'll cover games of Magnus Carlsen from 2021 through a couple of videos and do the same with games of Jan Nepomniachtchi. So let's begin. The first round of Tata Steel was played and Magnus was playing against Alireza Firouzja, probably the future challenger for the title. Here they played the Queen's Gambit, but from a different move order. And after h6, bishop h4, bishop e7, Magnus took. And here Firouzja took with the knight. Also, ed5 was quite normal here. And after e3, castling, bishop d3, c6, queen c2, we would have totally different type of position, Carlsbad structure, which is very often played. Instead, he took with the knight. And here Magnus took, and now e4. The downside of this position for black is that he gives full center to white. After e4, now he took, bc, and now he castles. White is developing his pieces by bishop d3. Black tries to undermine this center by c5. Castles, and now he takes, and goes b6. Here he wanted to activate his bishop, to fianchetto his bishop and to connect his rooks. If he tried something else, for example, if he tried e5, in this case, to open up the c8, h3 diagonal, it wouldn't be as good because it gives white a passed pawn with d5. And even though black gets some blockade with knight c5, blocking the c-file, after rook c1, one possible way for black to play is to give up the bishop for a knight. But still, white is better since he has a d-file, and also it will be hard to control the c-file. And if you try something like b6, white always has some ideas like a4, a5 to weaken the b6 pawn and put pressure on it, and then switch to the b-file. So Firouzja chose a more solid approach with b6. And now Magnus tries to break those queenside pawns by a4. Bishop b7 by black, and now a5. Also, he tries to push a6 to make this bishop on b8 uncomfortable. So he took, and now rook a5. Now black has a passed pawn, but at the moment it's more a cause for concern since white can attack it by doubling his heavy pieces on the a-file. Now black plays knight f6, trying to make some counterplay, targeting the central pawn on e4. Rook e1 defending it, and now rook fd8. Queen a1, like I said, he attacks the a7 pawn, and now queen c7 was played. Now if white takes on a7, black will take, and go rook a8, forcing the exchange of queens, after which rook c8 is happening and the c5 pawn is under attack, so white has to choose. Does he want to keep the e4 pawn or c5 pawn? If he plays rook c1, for example, after bishop e4 the position is equal. The material is equal and the c-pawn is not that dangerous. Instead, in this position, Magnus played h3. Just a waiting move, giving his king breathing space. And now white plays a6 here. And again, the a pawn is not hanging because of the e4 pawn, the pressure on the e4 pawn. Bishop cannot move from d3 because he's defending e4. And Magnus tried rook c5, but now queen f4, attacking the e4 pawn once more. Rook e5 now to defend, and now knight d7. White goes back, and black goes back to f6. And now white can just simply repeat moves with rook e5 and agree to a draw, but Magnus plays for a win. He's not content with the repetition of moves, and he goes for d5, sacrificing a pawn, which is very often seen motive in the semi-Tarrasch type of position. And here black took on d5, and now e5. Knight e4 and queen d4. blocking the d-pawn and also keeping the bishop on b7 very passive. And that's what makes this sacrifice worth it. The bishop on b7 is locked and it doesn't participate except of defending the d5 pawn. Rook c8, now he wants to exchange on c1, to play rook c1 next and to exchange one pair of rooks, which would make white's initiative less stronger. Now white tries to stop the rook c1 by rook a1, but now he allows a5. Black starts pushing his a pawn, rook a b1, and now bishop c6. And for now, black's position seems very solid, so white tries to spice it up a little bit. He goes e6, sacrificing another pawn, but in return he gets the e5 outpost. Alireza took, and now knight e5. His knight gets more active, and he will soon push the e4 knight with f3. Now, of course, f3 was a big threat, because of the pin on the 4th rank. So black went with the queen f6 and now f3, trying to kick this knight away and to open up the bishop to clear his path. He goes to g5 and now rook b6. Bishop goes back to e8 and now queen e3, trying to put tremendous pressure on e6. Black starts pushing his a pawn even further and now knight g4. Black's queen goes back, and here white takes his practical chance and takes on e6, sacrificing the exchange, but in return he gets a very powerful initiative. Black took, queen e6, and now black makes a decisive mistake. He goes bishop f7 here. Correct way to play was king h8, and after a move like knight h6, black cannot capture because that would just leave his king unprotected, and after a couple of more moves, that will lead to a checkmate. Or in this position, if he goes to h8, bishop g6, and a similar pattern. Bishop h5 was the only way to save the game, and but still, black's king looks very vulnerable, and it wouldn't be so easy to defend as black. Instead, in the game, bishop f7 was played, and now Magnus takes, gh, and queen takes h6. White is a rook down, but black's king is very weak, very vulnerable, and here Alireza plays queen c7, which leads to a forced checkmate. Rook a7 here was more resilient, but it's still losing. Rook e5 with the threat of rook g5, bishop e8, and now rook g5. Now black is forced to give up his queen, because if he doesn't, if he runs with his king like this, then rook g7, king f8, queen h8, checkmate. So he's forced to give up the queen, but after queen g5, rook g7, for example, queen d5, bishop f7, and queen d6, white would have a winning position since the a-pawn is not mobile, because the rooks are not connected, and there is always a danger of losing one of the rooks. Because if white's queen gives a check and the rook is not connected to something, that's already game over. Instead, he plays queen c7 here, and after queen h7, king f8, these are all forcing moves. Magnus plays queen h6, and now Alireza Firouzja resigned in this position, because after queen g7, he has queen d6, and on king f7, then queen e7 is checkmate. And if he goes to f7, then bishop g6 leads to a checkmate, and after king f6, bishop h5, and after king f5, g4. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video when I will show you a game between Yesipenko and Magnus. Bye.